Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another webinar here on Food Industry Executive. My name is Hillary Baker, and I'm super excited to have you all here today. Before we dive in, I do have just a couple of really quick housekeeping items. First, if you have any questions at all, go ahead and drop those into the questions panel at the bottom of your screen, and we will address those at the end of the presentation. Second, we will be sending out a recording of this event in the slides, so keep an eye on your inbox for that over the next couple of days. Now, without further ado, I am thrilled to welcome you to today's webinar, From Selection to Success, Navigating the Food and Beverage ERP Journey. We've got an informative session planned for you today. The timing has never been more urgent for food and beverage manufacturers to embrace transformative technologies, including best-of-breed ERP solutions. Market conditions at the moment are being roiled by economic uncertainty, and manufacturers of all sizes will need to improve operational efficiency in order to remain competitive. From ERP selection to final implementation, the process is long and challenging, yet it's perhaps the most important undertaking your organization will ever undertake. By doing your due diligence throughout the process, you'll ensure that you'll choose the best system that meets your needs and ultimately ensure a successful outcome. Our experts today have overseen many ERP implementations within the food and beverage manufacturing space. So I'd like to introduce them now. Please welcome Chris Conroy, Solutions Engineer for DCOM ERP, and Connor Roach, Director of Sales for DCOM ERP. Gentlemen, take it away.
Hey everybody, thanks for joining us again. And we're really excited to share some of the content and help you guys or enable you to really navigate the food and beverage ERP journey. So with that, Chris, let's jump into the agenda. So we're going to be talking today about understanding the business objectives that you're after and that you're looking to seek to improve your business and why. Understanding the unique needs of food manufacturing. Key features of an effective ERP for food manufacturers. Evaluating ERP vendors and solutions. Cost considerations and ROI analysis. And lastly, what does a successful ERP implementation look like? So first, let's work on defining and understanding your business's why. Why are you looking at an ERP? What do you need to do to begin? First, it's conduct a needs assessment. What you're going to want to do is meet with your team, understand from procurement, production, inventory, quality, traceability, how are your business operations currently? What do you do as a business to achieve where you are? Start to identify pain points throughout those processes. What are you looking to fix? What's broken? What works well? And then start to set business goals. What specifically are you hoping to gain with ERP? Is there something specific like scrap or waste reduction? Are you looking to improve traceability? Maybe it's to make compliance or audits easier. There could be a number of things that you're after, and that ties likely back to those pain points that you've identified. You ultimately, too, want to say, as a business, what does success look like? So start to be able to measure, what are we looking to gain? Then, in order to start to build that, to work towards that process refinement, you want to be able to do that with a cross-functional team. So you want to identify and include key stakeholders. So those are people from production, from quality, from finance, sales, IT, all the key areas of what makes your business you. We want to include key members from every group. You want to define, they're going to be the ones that will help you define what those requirements are for your ERP, and then also help drive adoption later on once you are in the implementation process. It's also very important that you're finding the right size team. You could have too many cooks in the kitchen or too few. So it's a balance of making sure you have the right stakeholders where you're getting the key input from those different groups, but then not having too many people in there where you start to have too many differing opinions, to make sure that you guys can stay focused on what's important and what really outcomes are you looking to improve and achieve. So use experience. You probably have employees that possibly have done ERP implementations before, or is the vendors that you're looking at, have they worked in the food industry before and helped implement ERP for customers like you? And Chris, thinking about building the cross-functional team, do you have any, you've done over 100 ERP implementations. What are some key call outs that you think you could give to help people find the right team?
Yeah, thanks, Connor. I want to echo your point about the cross-functional team and making sure to include members from multiple groups, right? What we've seen in the past is that people sometimes treat this as an IT project and kind of go hands off at that point. And it really is important to stress that this is not just an IT project.
Right.
This is a business project, right? The entire team is going to be impacted. While certainly IT is important and plays a major role, it can't be left on them to shoulder the load. What you're going to want is subject matter experts, right? And inevitably, there's team members that are going to have that knowledge. And what's important too is the knowledge of what you do, how that might impact others, because that's really important to try and call that out during an ERP implementation.
100%. Yeah, you making sure your focus is on your business, right? And business is more than just IT. So yeah, that is a great call out.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's definitely going to impact everybody, and having everybody on board is really going to be important.
Mm-hmm. Right. So once you have your group assembled and your team assembled, you need to start to define what requirements or what needs do you have out of your ERP system. So you want to tie this back to those business goals and objectives that you've already defined. What are those pain points? What are you looking to gain? And that's where you'll start to say, what functionality or key requirements do we have? As a food and beverage manufacturer, some ideas or functionality that we believe are critical are things like batch and lot traceability, recipe formula management, shelf life and expiration tracking, allergen management, regulatory compliance. So that's a multitude of different areas, production planning and scheduling, and then the dreaded recall management, which is a necessity. So it's really important as you start to build these requirements that you prioritize them as well. Where I've seen businesses do a really good job is start to say, what is our must-have out of an ERP? What would we want to have? And what would be nice but not needed? So you can start to prioritize all of these lists, and that's going to make sure that you can stay focused on what's most critical, what's going to have the biggest impact for your business, and ultimately set you up for success as you start to select your ERP.
That's all great points, Connor.
So now what's going to guide you in these requirements is being a food manufacturer. So Chris, let's talk about some of the unique requirements that food and beverage manufacturers have.
Yeah, that's really important, Connor, to talk about, because food and beverage is there's a lot of regulations, right? And the compliance is important too. Whether you need to maintain lot traceability, whether you need to manage SQF or safe quality food, the FDA, USDA. There's a lot of regulatory compliance needs that are going to really drive a lot of what you need to do as part of your ERP project. And it's critical for food manufacturers to make sure they manage the consumer safety and maintain their market access, right? The other thing we want to talk about with the ERP is streamlining the process, right? Giving the visibility across the organization to all of the data that's there, maintaining the necessary documentation, and the quality control that's needed to adhere to the food safety regulations that are present, right? And one of the things that I've seen is that I like to talk about how everybody is unique in what they do and how they do it, but at the end of the day, some of these controls and compliance measures that are put in place, they're the same across the board. So what's nice is a system like DCOM. We've seen that before, and we've been able to solve those challenges already, right? And we're going to talk about FSMA a lot, because that's the one of the newest regulations that's come down maintaining, compliance all the way back to the farm, right, where an animal may have been harvested from. So that's really on the minds of food manufacturers right now, because that's a looming deadline to have that traceability in place. And so then the ERP system is going to facilitate that process and facilitate those audits, right? And really ensures that accountability throughout your entire process. So some of the other things that we want to solve as part of an ERP project are the supply chain complexities that exist in the food and beverage industry, right? Whether it's managing multiple suppliers, fluctuating demand, there's lead time concerns, right? There's so many different options here that cause problems in your day-to-day lives that having a single ERP system really can help kind of solve, right, and help manage. So it's important when you're going through this ERP selection, making sure that what you're looking at can handle all of those challenges, right? We talk about perishable goods, and that's everywhere across the board in the food and beverage world. You're going to have expiration date or best buy requirements. You're going to have lot number considerations, right? And that contain the best buy information, Julian date calculations, things like that we've seen over and over and over again as requirements. And when I say it like that, I mean in a good way, because Connor, I forget how many customers we have in the food and beverage world, but I mean, is it like 40-something% of our customer base is in that?
It's exactly that. So about 40% and you're going to hear Chris and I reference DCOM often. That's the ERP that both of us serve. And yeah, exactly that. 40% of our customer base is food and beverage. So it's critical that during your ERP selection, and we'll talk about purpose built throughout this presentation here, and it ties back specifically to some of these complexities that the food industry faces. So yeah, Chris, spot on, 40%.
Yeah. And so we've seen this challenge before, these multiple challenges before, and we've solved for them already, right? And we'll show examples and talk about that you should really be cognizant of as you kind of embark on this journey, because you might not have thought about some of the things that we've encountered before that you need to kind of help out with. I think I went too far. So the goal here is to go ahead and make sure when you're selecting your ERP, right? You want to make sure that you streamline your operations, right? And build it so that it really kind of helps kind of guide you through, from start to finish. Because there's a lot of moving pieces in the supply chain, right? And managing all of them on your own is darn near impossible. So, whatever tools you're using, we want to make sure that as much as you can, you have one tool that solves all those challenges.
And exactly as that is, in the food and bev industry, there's a lot of complex needs and challenges that you're facing, and you need a purpose-built ERP that can take those complexities and make them simple, right? You want this to be a tool that your users can drive efficiently, effectively, and easily, and that's exactly what the role of the ERP system is to do, is just that.
We always like to kind of joke, you get over, you want to make sure if somebody gets run over by a bus, that, no, I'm only kidding. Yeah. We don't want it to happen to anybody. But if anybody wins the lottery and they retire tomorrow, they're going to take a lot of knowledge with them in a lot of cases, right? So we want to try to get as much of that knowledge and share it in the ERP. And that way it kind of is able to kind of help the entire organization. Mm-hmm. So one of the things we want to talk about that's important when you're embarking on this journey is it really drives a lot of people's decision making, is the inventory management and with that the lot traceability, right? And Connor, I can't think of a single customer that we have in the food and beverage world that isn't doesn't have to manage lot traceability, right?
It's imperative. Absolutely.
Right. And it's even like things you wouldn't think about. All the even packaging materials, the idea is anything that touches the product has to be lot tracked, right? So sometimes down to your film and your wrap and all the packaging components that you might have, right? They all have to be lot tracked. So managing that effectively is essential, right? And you want to minimize waste and you want to maintain your product quality, right? And quality is something that we'll talk about as long as you let us, because DCOM and ERP in general, they should be able to kind of guide you through that quality journey, because it intersects at various points throughout. Real-time inventory tracking, right? Utilizing a warehouse management system, and DCOM has one that's Android based. It's fully built into the core of our functionality. So utilizing barcode scanning, that's key too as you go through this process. The technology is there and it's easy to use. It should be embraced. And that'll help you with your real-time inventory tracking. And then the traceability, we've already talked about it, that FSMA 204, that new regulation, that traceability essentially from farm to fork, right? And having a system like that and having that process in DCOM, we've already solved for it. It's super, simple in DCOM because it's built with that hyper-type process control in mind. So as we keep talking about our decision-making process, we want to talk about key features of an effective ERP for food manufacturers, right? Because we've already talked about some of the challenges, but what are features that'll help you manage those challenges? Well, in DCOM, you're going to encounter quality control and really kind of that hyper-tight process control I mentioned, right? It's going to be able to kind of guide you through as your core principle. And really should be something that you look for in any ERP system.
And let's talk a little bit about that, because we've referenced hyper-tight process control a few times now. So what that is having a system in ERP that can force user behavior. It doesn't allow users to deviate outside the system. What happens when you might be using two systems, right? Or maybe even allowing a system that doesn't enforce certain behavior, you start to get incorrect data, or you start to have users skip steps. And when that happens, we start to miss processes and start to make big mistakes. And really what we're trying to avoid is that cost of being wrong, the cost of picking the wrong inventory that maybe was expired or held. There could be several cases. Chris, I mean, can you think of any off the top of your head from a process control where we didn't see what good looked like and it maybe led to some costly mistakes?
Yeah, Connor, I've seen it a few times. The same kind of idea has happened to our customers without a system in place to kind of help guide them. And that's when you use the wrong quantity of an item, whether it's too little or too much. And without a system to help validate that you're using the right quantity, you can ruin a batch, right? Sometimes irretrievably you can't be fixed. So, and any with the cost of raw materials and the quantities of these batches, I've seen where the wrong quantity being used led to tens of thousands of dollars worth of material being unfortunately wasted, right? So that's one thing that an ERP system can do, because as an example, in DCOM we have a min and max quantity and controls around how much has to be measured and weighed, right? And so that's the kind of functionality that can really help you avoid some of those problems. Mm-hmm. Another one that I've seen too, and I talked about the warehouse management system earlier, right? With the barcode scanners, with the lot expiration dates being so important, one of the things we want to do is validate that the lots we're using haven't expired yet. And so you want to make sure that any system you choose is going to be able to do that and validate your lots as you scan them, because quite frankly, that's the whole point of doing that scanning, is to track what lot you're using and to make sure it's the right lot, the right product for that batch, right? Those are the concerns that you want to make sure you avoid, again, spoiling a whole batch with the single slip up.
Right. And if you're using like Excel spreadsheets or some manual process,
Yep.
you can't force that behavior. And that's exactly what a good ERP system is going to do. Is going to have hard stops, and think of like bumpers as you're bowling. It's going to guide you exactly to where you need to be and enforce certain user input to achieve better business processes and better results.
Exactly. So, Connor, a couple other things I want to mention here too is that with the quality control and that process, right? We want to utilize, we want you guys to utilize the machinery that you already have in place, right? So one of the things you'll see is scale integrations. You're already weighing the product, you already have the scales in place. Well, let's transmit that value the scale has into the ERP so we can avoid any discrepancies and any inaccuracies, right? And then the other thing when we talk about food manufacturing is that catch weight, right? A lot of our customers that we've seen in the food and beverage world operate in a catch weight environment where every unit can weigh something different, right? Think of your hams as we just had Easter, right? All those hams are an individual each that are weighed out and priced by the pound. So DCOM has functionality that will integrate with the scale and produce those catch weight eaches and really eliminate the need for writing down, right? And paper tracking of those products. And that's where a quality control process can fall apart without those controls in place.
Yeah, you're eliminating having to either A, write down the actuals, or B, round to make it easy, right? So we're
Right.
streamlining the process of getting that actual weight
That's right.
on a label and tagged appropriately so you know how much was actually consumed.
You just said something there that was really important, that where people currently will round in situations like this, and they'll give away product, right? They'd rather be too heavy than too light, and that leads to giveaway, which is something else you want to track. Track your giveaway. There's all kinds of nuances to the food and beverage world that you want to make sure your ERP vendor has a lot of experience in that realm, right? Because we see that all the time where our competitors really just don't have a strong footprint in the batch and process world, in the food and beverage world, and they have to use bolt-ons and other third-party software to solve. Whereas in DCOM, we have the single solution that will really drive that transformation across the entire company.
Right.
So as we go through this process, we want to make sure that with the quality control, we're managing the compliance, right? That we talked about that already. We'll talk about it again. It's every day in your lives you're dealing with that, and so are we, because we're solving those problems for you. And again, that hyper tight process control, eliminating the cost of being wrong.
And then even going back, Chris, to you mentioning multiple systems to get the job done, right? When you don't have a purpose-built solution for food and beverage manufacturing needs, you start to rely on other systems. And what that does is now you have maybe system one numbers, let's call it inventory, right? You might have inventory numbers from one system and they don't match what your ERP says.
Right.
So we start to get numbers that aren't adding up. And when we can reduce these outside systems and make sure that your ERP is handling your specific needs and we don't have to rely on other solutions, we start to get more accurate data. We can enforce certain behavior because we're not in all the other systems, and we ultimately achieve, like what we've said, hyper tight process control.
Yep, that's right. So, and we could talk about quality control for the next 25 minutes and be out of time, but we'll move on. And if anybody needs further clarification, we're certainly happy to carry these conversations offline and dig further into your problems that you're having. But recipe and formula management is really important too, so we need to talk about it. And really, because in the food and beverage world, consistency is key, right? If you make the production process and having scalable, repeatable results, that's what makes the batch and process world different, right? Because the scalability is not there. You're not making the same widget over and over and over again, right? Whatever it is you're producing, there's variable lots, there's different raw materials each and every time, and with that becomes that opportunity to not have a consistency. And that's where a strong ERP system with a strong recipe management system can help with that, right? We want to have consistent management of recipes. It ensures consistent taste and quality in your food and process from start to finish, right? And again, the ERP is going to manage that for you, right? Ingredient sourcing is really important here, right? And now more than ever, right? We want to talk about, managing costs, managing landed costs, and without saying that word, that's a bad word right now, the tariffs, how is that affecting the cost of your product and being able to manage, right? And that lot to lot consistency. So those are things that you want to manage and have an ERP system help you with, right? We have seen countless times country of origin as being something that was a requirement, or at least a piece of information that was important during the process, right? Certain customers won't let you source raw materials from certain countries, right? So as part of your sourcing of your materials and your recipe management, right, you have to be cognizant of that and be able to have constraint management. So look for that as you're going through your process too. So it really comes back to, and Connor, all these things really come back to the initial slide you had when you talk about what are your pain points, what are your issues that you're dealing with, right? We want to really bubble those up as much as we can, as early as we can, because then you can handle and tackle that through the course of an ERP project. So, it's really important in the food and beverage world to manage all of those issues. So, as we move forward in our discussion, we want to talk about production scheduling and planning, right? Because one of the things we want to do is we want to optimize our production. We want to optimize our planning. We want to make sure we're managing our allergens. We want to make sure we're managing our changeovers, right? We want to make sure that we're utilizing the machines as efficiently as possible, right? And we're managing those limited resources.
And I think optimizing is a key word here. So what happens when you start to go into solutions or ERPs that aren't purpose-built for food and beverage manufacturers, you can't necessarily optimize operations. You might start to hear from operations or production that the ERP is slowing them down. Because at the end of the day, production rules all. We need to produce products, and we need to do it effectively and efficiently. And when you start to deviate from a purpose-built solution, you might start to have some challenges that aren't allowing your operations to optimize. Chris, I think you had a good example you had mentioned to me the other day about allowing production to actually easily stage material and save room and time from a production. Can you touch on that?
Yeah, that's Connor. Yep, appreciate it. We've solved this a couple times in the past, but one of the issues that a lot of our beverage manufacturers will face is limited floor space, right? And something that you're bottling or canning, you're bringing in truckloads of pallets of those bottles or cans. They take up a lot of space, right? Both when they're empty and then later on when they're full, right? So what we've done is we've managed the supply chain process so that when we're and you'll notice a lot of this stuff kind of ties together. We already managed the supply chain because in a good ERP system, they should all tie together. All these topics really work together. But what we were able to solve was to incrementally bring in and schedule those trucks to land at our docks as staggered, right? So that we don't bring them all in at the same time and have to store empty bottles and empty cans in inventory without the requisite space. We've seen people, a beverage, I've worked with a brewery that had I mean, to tell you the number of bottles they brought through their doors, I couldn't even begin to describe. But what they ended up having to do before they managed this with decom was they would store bottles in trailers out in their yard, right? And then they just didn't have any space on the floor. They just stored it out in the yard. And then you know, obviously managing that could have been a problem. But the point of all that is to say is you want to manage those individual challenges with an ERP because that's what they're there for, right? You want to use the intelligence that's in the system to help plan and schedule your production and purchasing, you know, as optimally as possible.
Or here, at the risk of sounding too corny, I'm going to do it anyways, but avoid bottlenecks, if you will.
Right? I can tell you're a dad. That was a dad joke right there. Holy mackerel. I liked it though. You know, we want to optimize the operations. You know, some of the benefits from the ERP are just an effective system for scheduling production runs, managing those resources to help meet the demand, right? Forecasting, you want to make sure any ERP can handle the forecast that you're going to get from your customers. A lot of our customers are contract manufacturers getting forecasts from their customers. We want to bring that in because that's going to help drive planning. MRP, right? If we haven't talked about MRP yet, it's a tragedy because MRP is so important. Material resource planning. Make sure the system you're looking at has the ability to calculate that on the fly, right? Long gone are the days where you think they were, where MRP runs overnight. But Connor, I just talked to somebody the other day that has an MRP process that runs overnight. As I swear, I'm not surprised by anything I hear anymore. So when you're going through this process, make sure that planning is easy to use, right? So we'll move on. I'm sure I'm getting over on time here, Connor. So you got to keep me honest here a little bit. But evaluating ERP vendors and solutions. So as you go through this process, right, you know, how do you want to select your vendor, right? I mean, there's, you know, let's face it, we deal with the same competition all the time. So I know there's a healthy landscape of software vendors out there. How do you choose the right one, right? Well, in my opinion, maybe I'm a little biased, but industry-specific vendors are really important. If you haven't guessed a little bit from our conversation, we have a little bit of knowledge in the batch and process, the food and beverage world, because we're like the insurance commercial. We know a thing or two because we've seen a thing or two. So all we deal with, I shouldn't say all, but most of our customers are in the batch and process world, and a lot of them in the food and beverage specifically. So, you know, you want to make sure that whoever you go with, that you make sure they have the knowledge to help guide you. You know, best practices, GMP, right? Those are all really important. You know, everybody here is here because they've been successful in manufacturing, but there's probably a way you can do things better, do things more efficiently. So if you partner with the right software vendor, you can learn a few things.
And that's a really important thing. So on the third bullet here, we talk about tailored solutions. You're going to want an ERP that can be configurable to your specific needs. When you have a purpose-built solution, like a decom, for example, in the food and bev space, you'll find that you don't need as much configuration because we're built for companies like you. So that's the importance there. There's going to be times, though, where you might even see some standard operating procedures in that industry-specific ERP where you may even have an opportunity to say as a business, maybe we're doing things a bit different than we should, and we should consider why this ERP is recommending to do it this way, because 40% of their customers are like us and they're all doing it that way, right? So you might even be able to change some of what you're doing and how you're doing it to match what that ERP is doing, and maybe even find some efficiencies in that.
Yep, that's a great point. Terrific. So, and making sure, you know, they have successful implementations, making sure you're doing your references, right? Making sure you're getting references from a like type of customer, right? Even in the food and beverage world, there's different nuances that you want to try to get it as many references as you can, specific references and then broader references, because a software vendor should be happy to share their successful stories and really want you to see and try to show how we've helped other customers, because that's what, at the end of the day, that's what any of us are here to do, is to make your jobs easier, to continue to produce the product that you're making and do it a little bit easier, more efficiently, and more cost effectively. Right. So as we go through and we talk about some of the solutions, we want to talk about the importance of configurability, right? We want to talk about how we do not want, by any stretch of the imagination, custom software. Connor and I get to sit here and talk to you for hours on the horror stories we've heard as we've helped people come from custom software, and they get so pigeonholed that there's no getting out of it, right? So the importance of configurability, so that as I once had a professor in college tell me, and that was a long time ago, Connor, before you might have even been born, I don't know, but he told me the only constant is change. And that's important as you go in through this endeavor, because heck, even by the time you go live, your business may have changed, right? So the importance of configurability, the importance of a scalable system, right? That scalability is if you can go as a contract manufacturer, if you can go from making 1 batch to 2 batches to 20 batches, whatever the number is, you're able to expand your customer portfolio, able to produce more product for them, able to get a stronger foothold with their business, right? And then it's just the adapting to change, like we already talked about, being able to just FSMA 204 again is a perfect example of that, because it just came down. I'm talking to customers all the time that are concerned about it, right? And really trying to get ahead of it, which it's too late to get ahead of it now, but if you can get on board now, you can get in front before it's due. It's going to be soon. So adapting to change is really important for your software vendors as you go through the process.
And I want to talk a little bit about scalability, because the purpose of an ERP is to help you grow, like Chris, just like you said, right? So we're expecting more efficiency, then we're expecting to enable your business to grow. And it's really important as you select an ERP partner is that you focus on that, is the partnership and scalability. Is this something that we can see ourselves using in 5 years, 10 years? It's really, from an ERP implementation standpoint, the fact we're having this presentation means that it's a big investment, right? An investment of time, cost, and you want to make sure you don't go with a partner, an ERP partner that you can't be within that 3, 5, 10-year mark. You want to make sure that it can scale as your business scales and there's room to grow. That's a very critical piece, I would say, is really honing in on long-term partnership as you work on this decision.
That's right. Yeah, the long-term partnership, it has to be called out, right? Because you don't want to do this again, right? You want to make this decision once. It's a very impactful decision, an impactful process, and it's not to be taken lightly. It's important, and we encourage you to do it, because transforming your business, we've seen businesses really just kind of explode out of the chute once they've got an ERP running, right? And then even with our DCOM Essentials, which came out about 1.5 years ago, it helped us kind of tap into the help the smaller markets, really take advantage of a full-fledged ERP and the benefits that come with that experience that we have, and to be able to do it on a little bit smaller of a scale, and be able to get some of the same positive results out of it. But I think it's great how we can help the manufacturing, food and beverage
And a
manufacturers.
big part of that too, from a partnership standpoint, is exactly the slide, right? Importance of your partner being able to support you. So what does their support team look like? What training is out there ongoing? A critical mistake that I've seen businesses make during the ERP selection process is you sign up for it, you implement it, and then you just continue to use it as is. there's a term out there. It's a fancy term called application knowledge erosion. Really, that's a fancy terminology for saying it takes 3 to 5 years for a business to lose a learned skill. Right now in the manufacturing world, there's turnover, right? Employees can go find other jobs, and it's a very competitive market to retain employees. And as a business grows, you can only retain that knowledge for so long if you're not combating it or doing something about it. And specifically what I mean is during the implementation process, we talked about your key team members. They get trained. They only retain so much of what someone like Chris would be teaching them. Then those people go and train end users, and maybe they only retain, let's call it 75% of what's taught to them. So we start to lose that knowledge even in the implementation front, and you start to get what's called tribal knowledge. So you want to make sure you have an ERP partner that has tools out there to make sure that your team and your business can continue to improve, can continue to learn, and can continue to grow and scale. Because your business, when you make this ERP selection, your business is going to look different in 5 years. So you need to make sure you're investing to ensure that the ERP is growing with you, so you don't feel like you're growing out of it. It's a common mistake, and you're making this big investment that you want to make sure that essentially it's an insurance plan to make sure you guys can continue to use it and grow with it.
Future-proofing yourself.
I'll step off my soapbox now on that one.
Well, no, Connor, I mean, in your world of the aftermarket world, I mean, you see it all the time. All of our customers engage with you because their business has changed from when it originally was implemented. So we see it every day. It's changing. So
right.
All right. And Connor, just calling it out, we only have about 3 minutes left, so we want to make sure we get some of this material covered. So
yeah, we can go through this pretty quickly. So when it comes to budgeting, right, your cost is going to vary depending on what ERP vendor you're going to go with, and that's one factor that you've got to think about is what's the quality ERP partner that you're investing in. What solution specifically does this offer that are going to meet your needs? And you want to make sure you're budgeting appropriately. You want to make sure you're budgeting for even unexpected expenses. So just as we had mentioned, your business is changing even throughout that implementation process, where you might all of a sudden, a few months into the implementation, say, actually, we just came across tariffs or whatever that might be, something changing in the world that you want to accommodate for. And that might end up leading into an additional budget. So make sure you're factoring in maybe even around 10, 15% variable beyond what that quote might say for you as a business, to make sure that you guys are staying on budget, on time. And a lot of that too goes into purpose built. It helps a lot when your ERP partner has seen it and been there. You can typically implement a lot more effectively and efficiently. Now, on the next slide, we'll talk about a quick ROI benefits. This all ties back to what were your business objectives? Did you define what is good going to look like? What are we trying to improve? Maybe how much scrap did we have previously, pre-ERP or pre this partnership? And what does it look like now? So you can start to measure and have tangible evidence of we've had success. It's a very, very important thing to make sure you're keeping track of clear metrics, so then you guys can look back and feel very confident that you've made the right decision.
Connor, I want to just call out, I know we're running short on time, but one of the ROIs we see over and over and over again in our implementations is just the cost savings and inventory scrap alone.
Yeah.
And we've got some case studies that we've seen and done where we've got people that have, triple digit, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of waste a year down into single digit, thousands of dollars of waste a year. So there's lots of those stories out there. If that's a problem for you guys, and I'm guessing it might be for a few, definitely use that and think about that as one of your considerations in an ERP, and making sure that there's a good inventory management, physical inventory process.
And that's a perfect segue to some of our success stories. And we won't dive into them. We'll share this PowerPoint and this presentation with you, and you'll have a link to be able to access this. But California Custom Fruits and Flavors, they saved 250K, right? Just in visibility, traceability alone. And it enabled, DCOM was able to grow with them, and their business was able to grow 400%. That's a massive accomplishment. And it's because the ERP didn't get in the way. It helped them optimize their processes and facilitate that growth. Another customer success story that you can look at is TH Foods. They were able to, they had a separated GL and production environment. And with DCOM, we were able to consolidate a lot of systems. And ultimately, we were able to split the time it took them to close the books at the end of the month. We were able to split that in half. That's massive. We're now working more efficiently. It's more accurate data, and they can focus on improving their business rather than the tedious paperwork of just managing their business, right? That's what success looks like. And we have countless success stories. You guys will be able to jump into here and look at that. But through references, like Chris had mentioned, there's a lot of ways to make sure that you guys can have a success story yourself.
So at this point, oh, sorry.
Yeah. Do we want to wrap up from a conclusion standpoint briefly, and then we could jump into some questions? I haven't seen any coming in through the chat yet, but feel free to start typing in your questions and we can answer them. But ultimately, from a conclusion standpoint, it's critical that when you're selecting an ERP partner, that they have experience and they've seen the food and beverage space so they can help work with you. You want them to understand that industry. You need to refine your business needs, and then collaboratively, you're going to be able to achieve better results because of that. So you have our contact information through this after this presentation. We'd be happy to talk with you and share some of our experience. Chris, you've got years and years of experience specifically helping food and beverage businesses select ERP, but then also implement it.
So yeah, Connor, I spent most of my time with DCOM actually implementing the software. So I've been in the trenches, rolled up some sleeves, and I've even done a few physical inventories with our customers that go live, because a go live day, we do whatever we need.
Yeah.
All right. I have a couple of questions for you guys if you're up for it.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Hillary.
Yeah, sure thing. Okay, so what are the most common pitfalls companies in the food and beverage industry face when implementing an ERP system? And the second part of that question is, how can they be avoided?
Yeah. So Chris, you probably have different thoughts than me. I'll share my thoughts out of the gates. I think it's critical that as a business, you need to remember your why. What are you looking to improve? What are your requirements? But why are those your requirements? So have your business objectives in mind throughout the whole discovery process. So you know, what are we trying to accomplish, and you can keep focus on there. And when you rank those requirements, that also is critical, because you're not going to focus on things that are just, it'd be nice to have. You can check off the must-haves, right? And what's the biggest impact for your business? Why is that? And I think keeping that out of the gates throughout the process at the front of your mind is the most critical thing to ensure you're making the right decision as a business. Chris, you might have some other thoughts or other considerations that would be helpful here as well.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo what you said, Connor, as well. But I would also add, one of the pitfalls I've seen is not having the right people on the project and not having the right subject matter experts on the project. And having people that are not afraid to take a chance and take some ownership of a process, right?
Mm-hmm.
Make a decision. Right. Connor, I can't tell you how many times I've seen a project, run the risk of being delayed because decision making couldn't be done. One person wanted it one way, another person wanted it another way, and for whatever reason they weren't able to see eye to eye. So, being able to make those decisions, and quite frankly, then having somebody in a position of authority to come over the top and make the ultimate decision, it could be important too. So you want to have a project champion as well, right? So, we didn't get too deep into the project roles, but there really are different roles in a project that you should make sure you have. And a project champion is a big one, right? Somebody that at a very high level in the company is able to kind of drive that transformational change, and be able to, make the decisions when time comes.
Yep, absolutely.
The other thing I want to add to that too, just and kind of touch on what you said, is the need to. So a lot of times people will feel they have to solve every single problem right away, right? And the scope, I think this is what you were talking about. The scope of the project becomes a little too large. The timeline becomes a little too long, right? There's definitely the ability to bite off pieces of the apple. How do you move Mount Fiji, right? One bite at a time, because sometimes that's going to go a long way towards a full transformational change.
Yep, and that boils down to, you have to keep in mind what are your must-haves, right?
What are the must-haves? Yep.
And that's going to allow you guys to make a good decision. And also having the purpose-built ERP partner, you can rest assured then, all right, maybe we are a meat and produce manufacturer or meat manufacturer, and they've seen this before. They have several customers in that environment. So if I can check my must-haves and my unique business processes that we have, well, then I can rest assured that likely those small things, we can check those boxes a little bit easier, right? Because they have the experience, they have the customer base, and it allows you to really end up making that decision with more confidence.
Great point.
It's important. Hillary, any other questions we have from the audience?
Yeah. So how can organizations effectively align their ERP implementation with the regulatory and traceability requirements in food and beverage?
I'll take that one, Connor. And really, ultimately, it comes down to, what are those regulatory agencies or bodies that you're adhering to, right? Let's talk about lot traceability, because I think if I'm not mistaken, that really kind of affects every single regulatory body there. And really managing that process, making it streamlined, and giving your users, your employees, the tools to do that easily and efficiently. And I guess what I'm ultimately talking about is a warehouse management system with barcode scanning, right? Because every successful lot traceability exercise I've seen has had, that lot number captured from start to finish, right? Farm to fork. I like that. I did not come up with that earlier. But it encompasses what we're dealing with on every single food and bev project, right? But giving your employees the tools to do that with the handheld scanners as an example is a great way to do it, right? And an easy way to ensure that you're meeting that regulatory requirement, right? SQF is something that a lot of our customers have. And one of the requirements of an SQF, Safe Quality Food audit, is making sure that the equipment is being sterilized every day, right? Making sure that some of those recurring tasks are being done. And that's a key component of an ERP system, is to be able to keep track of those tasks for you and drive your team through that process, rather than making your team have to remember essentially the SOP, right? DCOM can house the SOP and drive your process for you. So, those are just a couple of examples of how ERPs and quite frankly DCOM specifically can really help you from a regulatory perspective.
And you mentioned WMS, and I want to kind of even tie this back to a pitfall before. I was speaking to a poultry food manufacturer the other month, and they had a generic ERP system, right? So it wasn't a purpose-built ERP system, which led them to having a bolt-on WMS system.
Yeah.
And they referenced constantly, and they showed me, was we have our ERP numbers, and then we have our WMS numbers, and they aren't aligned. So that's where when you can consolidate processes in one system, you're going to get one number, right? And when you can enforce processes in one system, you're going to get even further one accurate number. And I think that's a huge point of consideration and emphasis as you're starting to look at ERP systems, is how can we make data reliable, accurate, and easy to enter? And that's where I think a tool, a solution like DCOM does just that.
Yeah. And I still don't see any questions. So the one thing I'm going to ad lib here a little bit and just kind of piggyback off of what you were saying there, Connor, excuse me, is an MES can really, and MES is the manufacturing execution system.
Yeah.
And what that's going to be able to do is give you some more enhanced visibility, some enhanced data, right? Because Connor, one of the things that we see consistently across the board is wanting to manage machine downtime and things like that, right? And just on the surface, that's a very straightforward thing for DCOM, and ECI has an APS MES solution.
Yeah.
And what that's going to do is give you that full picture, right? And be able to track all of those metrics from an MES perspective that you'd be looking for: the operational efficiency, right? The downtime, the hours, right? The scheduling, and the dependencies that exist, right? The changeovers.
That's a great call out, because we talked about a scaling business too, right? You want to make sure you're making the right decisions as you scale. So a lot of you are probably already tracking what's called OEE, overall equipment effectiveness. And tracking that allows you to make these decisions of how do we invest to produce more. If we're running really lean, let's call it 80% OEE, you probably don't have the ability to refine your processes to get more throughput, right? You're maxed out. So now you know, okay, I either need to invest in another facility or maybe more equipment so we can produce more products, because there's no way I'm getting more out of our equipment and our people. But maybe if I start to measure that and I notice I'm down in a 40% OEE, and I'm just like what you had said, Chris, you're tracking downtime. Well, now I know I need to invest in process improvement. How can we make sure that we're getting more out of our people, out of our equipment, and making sure that we're producing enough product to really deliver out of the door in an effective manner? And that it's that type of visibility that's going to allow you to scale faster and make ultimately the right decisions as you scale. How do we do it? Based off of the data. I'm making data-driven decisions at that point. So yeah, that's a great call out, and I think a thing that we do very, very well.
Yeah.
All right, awesome. It looks like we are running pretty close on time here. Do you two have any other closing thoughts to share with the audience?
No, I would say, Chris and I both, we work with DCOM ERP under ECI Solutions. And you'll have our contact information after this. We'd love to have a conversation with you, help you navigate the ERP selection process, and ultimately help you guys make a great business decision. That's what this is all about, enabling you with tools and information to help your business succeed. So reach out. There's some reference links here in this presentation that you'll get as well. Explore, click around, and we look forward to our conversations with you later.
Yep. Hillary, thanks a lot for hosting us, and appreciate your time. And thanks to all the attendees that joined and giving us a chance to talk to you guys.
Yes, thank you as well. And everybody keep an eye out on your inbox for the recording and the slides. And everybody have a great rest of your day.
Take care, everybody. Thanks a lot.
Bye.